This article popped up in the Jerusalem Post yesterday. It says the IDF knew of Hamas's plans to kidnap 250 people before the October 7th attack. This makes me uncomfortable because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that they would ignore all of this, that they would have this intel dating back to September, and that they would choose to ignore all of this. It doesn't make sense when you recognize the conversation that is being had right now, which seems to be like they've already decided on World War III and we're all getting drafted into it. And it doesn't make sense when you see the amount of censorship and the attacks that are happening to any person that stands up against it. So let me be clear on where I stand on this. Not a single American should be sent overseas to die for Israel. Period, point blank, do not care what you want to call me. No more Christian blood should be shed overseas.
Today's attack comes amid growing fears of an all-out war in the Middle East, with Iran and its proxies threatening to strike back against Israel for the recent assassinations of senior Hamas and Hezbollah leaders. The U.S. is beefing up its military presence in the region, sending additional warships and fighter jets. CBS's Deborah Pata is in East Jerusalem.
The war drums are getting louder. Following Ismail Haniyeh's assassination, Tehran says Israel must be punished for what it calls its cowardly attack on Iranian soil.
Candace Owens boldly questions the loyalty of American Jews who seem to prioritize their support for Israel over their allegiance to the United States. Ben Shapiro appears to advocate for continued conflict in the Middle East, often boasting about the Israeli government's strength to clobber Iran. It raises the question, where do his loyalties truly lie, with America or with Israel? Did he serve in the Israeli military, as many American Jews do? Imagine an American citizen of Vietnamese descent volunteering to serve in the Vietnamese military and still be allowed to hold on to his American citizenship. It simply would not be allowed to happen. While I find common ground with Shapiro regarding economic issues, I cannot support the idea of unconditional backing for Israel. Israel has its own agenda, which often conflicts with American interests. Any military engagement should be driven by America's own national interests. I don't pretend to understand the circumstances surrounding the events of October 7th. Given that Israel boasts one of the world's most formidable intelligence agencies, Mossad, I must ask, what went wrong? Was there a failure in monitoring, or was it something more deliberate? This brings to mind questions about the security failures of Donald Trump's assassination attempt. Were they lapses in strategy or intentional oversight? As a naturalized American citizen, my loyalty lies with the prosperity and growth of this country. Period. America should not engage in wars that don't serve its interests. Having lived through the Vietnam War, I vividly recall the turmoil in Da Nang, where we were constantly on the move due to bombings. It's hard to say who truly benefited from that conflict. Certainly not the Vietnamese, and definitely not the Americans. After the tragic loss of millions of Vietnamese lives and over 50,000 American lives, along with treasure spent, one must wonder, was it really about freedom? Fast forward to the deception during the Bush administration regarding Iraq and America's 2-decade engagement in Afghanistan. Where does Afghanistan stand today? Free? No. It has reverted to tribal rule, a fertile ground once again for terrorists to thrive. As a mother and aunt to young men of draft age, I reiterate that Israel's challenges are not my challenges. The push for war with Iran does not benefit America in any way. We lost in Vietnam by every conceivable metric. We failed in Iraq and Afghanistan, resulting in the loss of thousands of young lives and trillions of dollars. The neoconservatives on the right and the warhawks on the left are trapping our nation in a cycle of perpetual conflict. Their own children are not affected by the consequences of these reckless policies. It is young Black, brown, and rural white Americans who bear the burden of fighting. This pattern of endless warfare has characterized American history since the Vietnam War. I am weary of the manipulation of our country by those who appear to prioritize their allegiance to a foreign nation over their own. Over the past couple of years, observing Ben Shapiro's discussions gives the impression that he prioritizes his identity as an Israeli Jew above his American identity. I'm curious about the proportion of Jewish enlisted soldiers in the U.S. military compared to their population size. In Israel, military service is mandatory for all citizens, regardless of where they live, including those with dual nationality. Given this context, how many American Jews who have served in the Israeli Defense Forces subsequently enlist in the U.S. military? I suspect that the number is quite low, if it exists at all. Before anyone accuses me of anti-Semitism, let me clarify that I am not. My loyalty lies with America, not with any foreign entities. I am against war, especially when it could mean putting my children, nephews, and friends in harm's way for the causes of others.
Both Israel and Iran say they don't want this to escalate, but nobody wants to be the first to take a step back. Former